Welcome, everybody. The time is 6:30, and I would like to call this District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Marilyn, would you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez?
Present.
Member Beta Daniels?
Present.
Member Dillon?
Here.
Member Gretsch?
Here.
Member Strewing?
Here.
Member Thomas?
Here.
All right, thank you. I'll ask everyone to rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. First order of business is public participation. Do we have anybody? No? All right.
No, just second.
Great. Well, before we get into tonight's formal agenda, I did want to acknowledge the resignation of Alvia Nava from our board. We will formally acknowledge her service to the LT community at our regular action committee on October 21st, but certainly want to say thank you to her and send our best wishes to her and her family in their new chapter. Okay. So now we can move into committee reports. And we'll begin this evening with an update on the strategic plan, goal number 3. Brian?
Okay, thank you, President Gretsch. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's October, but this is the time of the year that we always kick off our strategic plan goal updates with goal 3, which is our high quality and diverse staff. Just as a reminder, a couple things to the board. Everything related to our strategic plan, including our 24-25 priority list, our data dashboard, all the work that goes, the content around the strategic plan is on our website, so it's all publicly available. The other thing related to tonight is back in May, our action teams, which is made up of our staff here at LT, they began the process of developing the priority list for this year. What they did was they looked at the 23-24 school year, the accomplishments, but also, some things that we said we were going to get to in 23-24 that we didn't, and they used that as a starting point for developing the draft priority list for this year. Those lists were then vetted through all of our leadership teams throughout late May, early June, into mid-June, and then also vetted through the board at the June 21st regular action meeting, and that became our, those became our priorities for this current school year. Fast forward to August, we kicked off the school year. Our action teams came back to the table, reviewed those 24-25 priority lists again, also did some target setting work for the year for both the 24-25 school year, but also the life of the plan. And it's shocking to believe, but this is a plan that was adopted in June of 2022, so this is already our 3rd year of what typically is a 5-year plan. We didn't identify that at the beginning of the plan, that it would be a 5-year plan, but in my head, I've always kind of thought this is going to be about a 5-year plan. So we're almost halfway there. So tonight we're looking forward, our team is looking forward to sharing a lot of really cool information around goal 3, which again is our high quality, diverse staff. We have a couple of guests as well, Kurt Johns and Kirsten Bacon. They're going to highlight a couple of the areas within goal 3. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Dr. Waterman and President Gretsch. Dr. Waterman's going to drive the slideshow, so we'll give him a second to get that going, and then we will move forward. As Dr. Waterman mentioned tonight, we are going to provide the board with an update on strategic plan goal 3. So Brian, if you could go to the next slide. As Dr. Waterman mentioned, our strategic plan is a comprehensive approach designed to guide the district's future, focusing on enhancing academic success, promoting well-being, and fostering an inclusive environment for all. It's centered around 5 key goals: student growth and achievement, learning environments and supports, high-quality diverse staff, family and community partnerships, and resource effectiveness and efficiencies. The plan aligns with the district's commitment to continuous improvement and reflects the district's mission, vision, and core values. Goal 3 of the strategic plan focuses on strengthening staff and fostering a positive culture to drive innovation, collaboration, and growth. This goal prioritizes attracting, retaining, and supporting employees while reinforcing the district's long-standing commitment to excellence. Additionally, it promotes empowering all students to pursue meaningful and successful lives through these efforts. If you could switch to the next slide, Brian. As shared with the board in previous presentations, each goal has multiple strategies. Goal 3's strategies are shown on this slide. We believe that the positive growth related to Goal 3 can be achieved by focusing on two main strategies within the goal: enhancing staff satisfaction, innovation, and campus unity through engagement, collaboration, voice, and professional development, as well as by attracting, recruiting, hiring, mentoring, and supporting strong employees who reflect our community and commit to our mission, vision, core values, and goals. All key tasks and priorities that are part of the work of Goal 3 are aligned to these two strategies. As Dr. Waterman mentioned, during the strategic plan update provided to the board at the end of the 23-24 school year, Goal Champions shared a brief overview of the work that's been done, as well as a look forward at some of the key priorities and tasks for this school year. These priorities and tasks were reviewed, revised, and augmented over the end of the spring and summer to the point where they were then shared with the specific goal action teams this fall. On this slide and the next, we have shared the key tasks and priorities for Goal 3 for the 24-25 school year. Some of these may look familiar as they are a continuation of the work that has begun in previous years and are more of ongoing tasks for Goal 3, while others are new for this year. The first bullet on this slide is related to staff onboarding, including refining processes for non-certified staff. While there are certainly inherent differences between work years and onboarding cycles for different work groups, we plan to use different elements of our certified induction and mentoring program to shape our work with non-certified staff onboarding. One of our induction and mentoring program coordinators, Kirsten Bacon, is here to share a little more about their work later in tonight's presentation. Looking at the third bullet, this bullet focuses on the work that continues to be done by the Certified Professional Appraisal Oversight Committee. As you recall, the board recently approved the recommended changes to the system that included a change to a 3-year evaluation cycle for tenured staff. The PAOC will focus its work this year on identifying choice options for staff to engage in during the second year of their evaluation cycle. Later in tonight's presentation, Physical Welfare Division Chair Kurt Johns will share some additional work of the committee as well. You will see that the final bullet point on this slide relates to similar work that we will begin for both the classified non-contractual and paraeducator work groups this year, with the goal of providing more effective feedback to non-certified employee work groups through the evaluation process. As we move on to additional key tasks and priorities, the first bullet of this slide pertains to insight interviews that we will be holding with first and second year staff. The district introduced these interviews for first and second year certified staff last year to promote growth in inclusion and belonging. This process began last year with a survey of new certified staff members of color at the end of the 23-24 school year, with plans to expand it to more staff members during this school year. The goal is to support new hires more effectively and enhance staff experiences at LT. The third bullet point is connected to our goal metric involving staff sense of belonging as measured by the Panorama Data Survey. This year, we will create opportunities for staff to participate in listening circles to discuss the key insights and perceptions identified in the Panorama Survey. These circles will give us an opportunity to work with staff and learn important information on the feelings and perceptions behind the percentages that were reported. Finally, the fifth bullet continues the work that Dr. Rowe has done with not only our district best affinity group, but with the efforts to build and strengthen the statewide affinity group network. These efforts have included regular meetings of the LTHS affinity group, as well as the planning and participation in the larger regional affinity group annual conference each year. The next two slides show the goal metrics that have been identified for Goal 3. For each metric, we have included the baseline data representing the 21-22 school year, the current data, which represents the 23-24 school year, and the life of plan targets. While we still have a great amount of work to do for each metric in order to continue to move towards our life of plan targets, We are very proud of the efforts and the effects that they have had on the metrics. Slide 6, which is the slide we are on right now, shows the metrics related to staff demographics and certified staff retention. Please note that the certified staff retention figure is a 3-year average as determined by the State Board of Education and as reported on our school report card. The current data shows TBD as this information has not yet been released for the 23-24 school year. I'll give the board a second to review this, and then we'll move on to the next one.
It's probably a good time to just mention that, we have 36 metrics on our scorecard, and there's not this magical time every year where everything can be updated. It's just a rolling time frame when data is available. But if there was a really good time of the year to report it, it would be now, because a lot of the data that you're going to see for Goal 3 is fairly recent, 23, 24. And as we get another month into this, so late October 30th actually is when the Illinois School Report Card data is all available. That's a really good time of any school year where there's a lot more data available as well. So good time to mention that.
Wait, so then, are those numbers here, Brian, above I know that we're waiting for the school report card on that last staff retention metric, but those other two, are those like as updated as they're going to get, or are you saying?
Those are as of the end of the 23-24 school year.
Okay, okay.
And I could talk a little bit about that. As it relates to certified staff demographic, those numbers don't shift tremendously during the school year. Our number of our certified staff certainly doesn't change very much from the start of the school year until the end, although it can. But for non-certified staff, that is a much more dynamic work group in terms of people coming in and people leaving the organization. And so in order to provide consistency with those two metrics, we have taken an end-of-the-year look at those. So those are the numbers for both the certified and non-certified staff demographics as of June 30th, 2024.
Okay, and they're reported, that's how we're reporting it, right? That's like from our data.
As far as for the school report card pulls a little bit of some different data in terms of the categories of staff that they are bringing in, but that's how we have consistently reported it for our strategic plan, yes.
Got it, thank you.
Absolutely. Then moving on to the next slide. This slide shows the metrics related to non-certified staff retention, staff sense of belonging as reported on the Panorama survey, and the percentage of staff holding an endorsement in special population areas, namely special education, EL bilingual, or reading specialist. For all but one metric on this slide and the previous slide, the current data is higher than the baseline. And for the one metric where there has been a decrease, we have seen a large amount of growth from the current year data than over what was reported on last year's data at this time. The increases that we have seen in our goal metrics do not happen in a vacuum. They are supported by the work that is done by everyone at LTHS and through the support of our families, communities, and the Board of Education. Before we move on to highlight our induction and mentoring program, as well as our professional appraisal oversight committee, I'd like to ask the board if there's any questions about Goal 3 or the goal metrics that I can answer. We'll certainly have more time after the rest of the presentation as well, but since we are on these slides, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Or about some of the key priorities and tasks from before as well. Okay.
I have one.
Sure.
The establish listening circle opportunities to discuss with staff the overall perceptions or responses found in the Panorama data. Can you talk a little bit about how you envision that happening? Is it invitation? Is it open invite? How do we feel like we're going to get a good? Because I think it's a great idea just to start, but I'm very interested in how you envision that happening.
Absolutely, and Dr. Tyrell, Dr. Rowe, if you want to jump in, you could certainly do that as well. We plan to reach out to all staff from all work groups and invite them to multiple opportunities that we'll have throughout the year. We plan on administering the fall Panorama survey in November, so it's going to be timed with that as well too. But late fall throughout the winter into second semester, reaching out to all work groups at various times, whether it's planning periods for certified staff to be able to come down and meet with these learning circle facilitators, which would be members of our administrative team, member of our restorative practices guiding coalitions. For our non-certified staff members, we would have those opportunities during PLC time where they might not have something otherwise planned, during early dismissal day afternoons, and some other opportunities before or after school possibly if they're able to attend. But the plan is to open it up to who is interested and available to come down, because we do want to get as many staff members as we can. We've talked about how we wanted to do that, if we wanted to focus on particular work groups at each time, but we felt that getting a broad range within all of those areas would be best, because people are coming into these surveys with different perspectives, especially as we're looking at the non-certified staff perception data. We have a work group that's buildings and grounds, we have paraeducators, we have classified non-contractual, that all represent very different roles within the school. And so we want to make sure that we are giving everyone an opportunity to be heard, and for us to listen to that and really take that to be able to shape some of these, not only the key tasks and priorities for Goal 3, but the other key tasks and priorities for the other 4 goals of our strategic plan, because they are all truly interconnected. I don't know if the rest of you felt like there was anything that.
I would just say it's a nice step in the evolution, right? We've administered the panorama multiple times, we've reviewed the data, and we've had conversations, right? We've looked at what the data says, and we've had conversations about actions that we can take, but this will give us an opportunity to actually hear from the people that are taking the survey and part of the work groups. We envision that we'll probably have one common question that's asked across all listening circles, and then kind of generating, through the help of our staff, a bank of questions so that we can seek feedback in many different areas around just the larger scale concept of belonging. And we know it's important to your question, we know it's important to get a representative sample, so we hope that a lot of people will, take us up on the invitation, and then we'll use different strategies in the event that we don't have a huge turnout to join those opportunities. And then we're going to do them with kids as well.
Yeah, I just think it'll be very interesting, right? Because this is not an evaluative, this is and you don't want it to come across that way, right? You want people to feel comfortable being able to speak freely and openly and honestly without the fear of what will administration think if I start being that squeaky wheel, right? So I imagine there's probably some work also being done with the union to just share the vision and the concept behind this being truly a collaborative venture to try and get this information.
Yeah, as things develop, certainly that we'd be engaging in conversation about what the plans and the protocols would look like. And we're going to have teachers and counselors facilitating listening circles as well. And we're going to train some students to facilitate listening circles with our students. So we hope that it'll be a collaborative approach in the facilitation as well.
Too, at the end of the day, this was born out of administrators analyzing, discussing panorama survey data multiple times over a 2 or 3 year period, and saying, what, we really need to drill down this.
Yeah.
We've done this now 4 times. We've administered it. We can look at the overall collective data, but we need to learn more about what these responses mean. So, what's the best way to do that? Let's ask them.
And I think the piece of it is also when we're talking about belonging, this is much more personal, versus do you know what I mean? How are you feeling about this place? So even for all of us have had that discussion, well, I may define that differently, and we need to identify what those things are for folks so that everyone feels like they can come here and feel their best about being in our school community. So in contrast to being some of the other pieces, you might be looking at that this is really that personal sense of connection to our space and place. Mm-hmm.
Good.
Just a question regarding the non-certified staff in the panorama survey.
Absolutely.
So, I know you were getting to some of the questions, but just because that did go down, how many, what was the percentage, well, you don't have to say it now, but of folks who took the survey like out of like the non-certified? Like, was it like 85%? Was it 90%? Or
Like, what does that 51% represent in terms of the overall
Right.
numbers of responses? Do you have that
I
information?
because
don't
it
have
could
that
have
up-
been like a low number that
Right.
took it,
Right.
And that's why.
Absolutely. I don't have the exact number, Michael, but if you remember from last year when we were presenting this information to the Board of Education, we did see a big drop in that staff perception data for non-certified staff. And one of the things that we noticed was there was also a drop in the number of overall staff, in the overall number of staff members that took it. So that meant everybody who did take it represented a larger percentage of that total. So what we did is we spent a lot of time working with the different work groups last year, the non-certified work groups, to really make people aware of the survey, the importance of taking it for two reasons. Because we wanted to have more representative numbers of a larger number of staff members that would be taking it, but then also to be able to get that data to find out how people were feeling about it. So we were very confident in those efforts, and we did see a much larger percentage of our staff members taking it, so that precipitous drop then rebounded and moved back up to where we were, not quite where we were at that 54%, but moving back up from that precipitous drop. I think it was around 34 because of the number of staff members that took it for the previous data. So it built back up. But that is an effort that we want to do. One of the concerns that we've had is just making sure people are aware that while not all the questions may apply to everything that they're doing within their role, there are certainly a large number of questions that do. And so if they're taking the survey and they see questions that are related to students or classrooms, and it might be an administrative assistant or a technology person from our technology services that's taking it, they may see that and say, well, this isn't applicable to me. We don't want them to not take the rest of the survey, right? Because what that's going to do is going to give us data that's really going to be inconsistent and not going to be able to help us answer some of these questions that we're hoping the listening circle is going to do. So we told them, just you move past those questions, and there are questions that are applicable to you in your role. And so I think as we continue to do that, it's going to continue to improve the number of people that are taking that test and then provide more consistent data across the board. What we don't want to have happen is a year, let's say, where in the non-certified side, we have 100 people take it, one administration of it, and then 45 people take it the next. That's just going to make those numbers very, statistically inconsistent, and we don't want that. We want it to be pretty flat. So that has been a big effort that we've had.
I'll get those numbers, though, for you guys and share them with you later in the week. in
And
terms of
do
what
we
that
administer it at the
represents.
same time every year? Okay.
Usually in November and in May, April, May.
Okay. Differently in November than you feel in May. Something to think about, so.
Yep.
Were there any other questions? All right. So then at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our two guests. We do have Kirsten Bacon here, who is speaking on behalf of herself and Jeremy Vertis, who are our induction and mentoring program coordinators. And then after Kirsten is done, Kurt Johns, who is our physical welfare division chair, will talk as a representative of our professional appraisal oversight committee. Dr. Wanneman, if you could go to the next slide, or actually 2 slides forward.
I'm just on, there we go.
There we go.
So good evening. Again, yes, I'm Kirsten Bacon. My counterpart Jeremy couldn't be here. He had some family obligations, but we both wanted to start out by saying thank you. Jeremy and I are both 2 years new to this position, and through really every suggestion that we had for change, some quite large, we've gotten nothing but encouragement and a go right ahead and try it. So we just want to say thank you to admin and the board for supporting and encouraging us through this, because it's been very exciting for both of us. So just some background, a lot of the change that we wanted to make was just because Jeremy and I are both over a decade in at LT, and we both felt that new teachers had some hurdles in feeling like they belong and they were welcomed right off the bat by the entire staff. LT has a split campus, which is really hard to navigate, not seeing even people within your own department sometimes for months. There are people who you will not meet or see for years if you're not a commuting teacher. And then just the way our hallways are set up, a lot of times you are kind of in a hallway with your department. So meeting and seeing people outside of that can be difficult. So we tried to think of ways that right off the bat people could feel welcome and engaged with people, not only within their department, but outside of that right from the start. So that was kind of the impetus for a lot of the changes that we were trying. So one of the first things that we, on the slide, is trying to tailor the way that we work through the mentoring and induction week. We, although have a lot of new teachers, we have staff that are not necessarily in the classroom or in the classroom with different capacities. So instead of a one-size-fits-all program, we really try to tailor it to what each group needs. And we've talked to the DCs about what they feel that their people need most, and past staff who have gone through the week to see what would help them best in not only feeling prepared to do their job, but also to feel welcomed into the building. We changed the bus tour slightly. The new staff goes on a bus tour that takes them through neighboring communities and tries to partner with people in the community to see where our kids come from, because there is a wide range of neighborhoods and places that our kids come from. And for teachers who maybe are not familiar with our district, to be able to see that is, I think, eye-opening for many, and to keep that in mind when they are trying to tailor their instruction or their approach for the different kids in front of them is very important. Could you go to the next slide? We also tried to change the way we do our monthly after-school meetings. Again, instead of a kind of one-size-fits-all where you're just learning like LT things, we are trying to tailor it so that all first and second years are together for about a half hour. Dr. Rowe is actually our next speaker, where it's something that all of us need, and then they break off into separate subgroups of first and second year in order to do some learning. The first years go with Annetta Rico for formative process, and then the second years go with Dina Mancini for SIOP training, which is some strategies for our multilingual learners. And then one of the biggest changes that we started this year that is getting underway actually this week is peer observation. We really thought that peers observing peers, that we can all grow from that. And we thought what better way than to start that than with our first and second year teachers. So we paired them with teachers outside of their department because we can learn from other teachers regardless of what they teach. And we sent out a survey to veteran teachers, and we had almost 90 people say absolutely come, and they opened their doors to us. So this week actually is our first rotation where teachers will go and observe, and they'll get an area of focus for every observation, and just take notes, something that you could steal and use right away, and then something that you just want to kind of maybe do a little more research on or brainstorming with in order to use in the future in your classroom. So everything has been really exciting. We've gotten really positive feedback from all the changes that we've made. So again, thank you for your support and encouragement through this whole process, because it's been exciting to be a part of. Does anybody have a question?
I do. For the SIOP training, so is that, like, will they be certified for that, or is that just introduction?
So our presenter is SIOP certified, Dina is SIOP certified, but at the end of the kind of year of training, they will not necessarily be SIOP certified, but LT has a wonderful opportunity right now to be to get a multilingual certification, and so we definitely do encourage them through that, to plug that as much as we can to say these are strategies that are directly related to multilingual learners, but they really do help with all of our learners in the classroom, and so they won't be certified at the end of the year, but we do kind of encourage them to maybe continue that.
Would there be a way to get them certified from that? Because that seems like a great opportunity, given that we're looking to have more teachers have that training, that certification. Would there be a way to like incorporate it in? Like if you just took 3 more, I have no idea, but if you just took 3 more hours,
Sure.
You know what I mean? You would have that there.
I mean, that's a great idea, and I would definitely look into maybe having a cohort of sorts within the LT walls to at least start that process. That's a great idea. We're not at that point right now, but I could.
Because I would love to see what could be there, because I think it's so great to see that there has been so many more teachers having that, having the SIOP training for that, especially as a parent of a child that was, an EL student. That, it was it's changed so much that I'd love to see it change more. And if there'd be a way to incorporate that in, it would be, to me, like, it'd be a great opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
We've talked with Dina Mancini about expanding it to do, kind of like Kristen was saying, a cohort, so that's definitely on the table. I think in terms of the after-school paired with the mentoring, the time component is just not quite enough. At least
Okay.
that's my understanding, that because of all the other things that they have to review, especially as first and second year teachers, I think it would extend that time a lot.
I just didn't know what, like, you know, what the time commitment is to where it is, to just see if there was a way to be like.
There's like
or-
an online option to continue.
Yeah, or, I
it
mean,
or
I have no,
something.
it just seems like a great opportunity to lock them in.
Sure.
For sure.
This is all really great. I really, really appreciate it. But that district bus tours that you guys are doing, so that's new this year, or
No.
was it done last year too?
Yeah, the bus tour is
Yeah, the bus tour has been around
years.
for a
It
long
has been
time.
run
Yeah,
for
I don't think
quite
I
a
did
long
either,
time.
and I
It's
kinda
just
wanna
changed.
see.
That's all, yeah. It's
Okay.
just changed.
Yeah.
But it had, yes, the bus tour has run for, I can't.
Scott,
you
how
could
long?
say-
When I
you could
30
started-
years?
Until it started it.
Okay, so 20, 25 years?
And I
And so
started in
then-
2000 and I was on it.
Do you because it's not practical to expect that you're getting all the schools in unless, I guess, like.
Yeah, I could talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what we did.
Yeah, I'd
So
like to know a little more about how that.
we drove through all the
looks.
communities.
Okay.
So we partnered with First Student to provide transportation with us. We started at North Campus, went through all of the communities. We drove past as many of the middle schools as possible.
Okay.
But we stopped at the Leader Shop across from South Campus, so we learned a little bit about what the programs that they offer and the leadership opportunities that they have for students, not only at LT, but students within the Lyons Township community and other high schools as well. From there, we traveled to District 107 and spent time at Pleasantdale Middle School, learned about their school district, and they were excited to talk to us a little bit about their communities and the students that they serve. So we spent some time there, did a district tour, learned a little bit about them. We went through Willow Springs, Burr Ridge, into Hodgkins, McCook as well, and then went into Brookfield, past the loft in the loft facility that NAMI runs by Eight Corners. So because they had learned a little bit about that at the new Teacher Township breakfast. They also learned a little bit about that at
I'm glad you brought that up.
at the Leader Shop as well, too. We also stopped at the community center in LaGrange, on the east side of LaGrange, and learned and met community leaders from LaGrange, and they talked to us about their efforts within the community and really the diversity within LaGrange, and that was a wonderful opportunity that Dr. Rowe and her team facilitated and set up. And then we also stopped at Park Junior High as well, too, and learned a little bit about District 102. So we had a chance to stop in a variety of places, see the smallest of our public school, middle school, and are the largest. And we plan to continue to do that next year. We also provided an opportunity for all of the other district superintendents of our associated elementaries to speak. So when we were at District 107, we had the superintendent from Highlands and the superintendent from McClure, or from District 101 and District 106. They were also there to speak, so they talked a little bit about it before we went on the tour of Pleasantdale Middle School. When we were at Park Junior High, there were representatives from District 105 and LADC as well, too. So we had all of our elementary school districts. The only school district that wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, was District 103. They just said they weren't able to attend. They had some conflicts that day. But it was great. And our teachers got a lot of Pleasantdale and Park and Gurry swag from the different people. They learned a lot about the communities, not only to see it visually, but to learn about the history of it and kind of the origins of the communities and everything in between. I think that stop at the community center where they had a chance to see the murals that the board has heard about through the different efforts of the Community Diversity Project. I think that was just a wonderful experience as well, too. So it was great.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of nice to get to see what that tour kind of looks like. So, thank you for that.
Absolutely. Were there any other questions for Kirsten regarding the induction and mentoring program? Thanks, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then moving on to the Professional Appraisal Oversight Committee, this is a committee that is made up of individuals from our LTEA as well as the administration, the LTE administration. The goal of this committee or the charge of this committee is to take our certified professional appraisal system, monitor it, revise it, make changes as we feel necessary. We presented to the board, and the board approved the recommendations, as I said earlier, to make some pretty significant changes to our professional appraisal system for this school year. Those recommendations were approved in the spring. And really, the biggest change was moving from a 2-year certified or tenured evaluation cycle into a 3-year tenured evaluation cycle that gets phased in order to provide some balance between the divisions. But that's certainly not the only thing that our committee has been working on. It's certainly the largest, but it isn't the only thing. Kurt Johns is a member of that committee and has been for quite some time in his role as Physical Welfare Division Chair. So Kurt's been gracious enough to come speak to us tonight about some of the work that the PAOC has been doing.
Good evening, everyone. I feel like Ed kind of set me up here. I have to follow someone who's taught a class called interpersonal communication for years, all about public speaking, and then now you get me. So I apologize in advance. As Ed had mentioned, we're in our first year of our formally adopted 3-year evaluation cycle for all our non-tenured certified staff. The real focus is not just on lengthening the time between the cycle, but truly building in a structured professional development and support for our teachers. It's all centered on teacher growth and improvement that we really weren't able to formalize in a 2-year cycle. The structured support should lead to student growth and increase student achievement. We also adopted the revised Charlotte Danielson framework for teaching. This is the first major revision by the Danielson Group since 2013, and it puts an emphasis on student-centered learning, along with equity and social-emotional learning. We've embedded our revised rubrics into our observation process, and it's really meant to provide feedback and clarity for our teachers, and it's rooted in an objective process for all staff. At this time, our committee continues to meet regularly. Our primary work is really on formalizing those year 2 options that Ed had kind of talked about regarding professional development, and I think that this is kind of the root of that 3-year evaluation cycle and why we wanted to make a shift to the 3-year model is we can work in and utilize some of the observation feedback that we were able to provide our certified staff and kind of build that into a professional development model where we can really support teachers' continued growth and improvement for our students. We're currently, we've identified up to 10 potential options for certified staff to engage in, and right now we're kind of in the process of determining what evidence teachers will need to show of their work and growth in those areas. As we mentioned last year, we had a small group of teachers and administrators pilot the Evaluise system. We really liked that process. We found a lot of value in that, and we've transitioned all of our certified staff, and we're working to familiarize them in this new system this year. This system has allowed us to really streamline the feedback process, easily share materials, and have everything regarding evaluations housed in one spot. We continue to offer training and support to teachers throughout this year regarding the Evaluise system, as well as the new Danielson framework, to set them and ultimately their students up for success.
Are there any questions for Kurt regarding the Professional Appraisal Oversight Committee?
I was just going to ask if the Danielson framework is something that's been adopted statewide. Is that something that all public schools have to
So
use through?
the state doesn't formally say all that it has to be the Danielson model. The state model is reflective of Danielson, but the evaluation law says it has to be a framework for teaching that has to be evidence-based, and Danielson certainly is the biggest, and I would say the vast majority of school districts use Danielson. Some use Marzano. But as far as the new version of Danielson, I don't believe that that's been incorporated into the state model yet. Up until recently, there weren't rubrics for the new Danielson framework for teaching. That has been a relatively new development within the past school year. Some school districts were a little ahead of us in terms of adopting the formal or the new Danielson model for certified staff members. I think many more have adopted it for this school year. So we did that for this school year for our certified teachers. We are working to identify we're working with models that we have from another school district to identify ways that we could take the rubrics for our support personnel, so counselors, social workers, school nurses, librarians, to be able to incorporate the elements of the new Danielson into the existing Danielson rubrics. Right now, there are no Danielson 2022, which is the new Danielson model. There are no rubrics for those support personnel that are official from the Danielson group. So school districts have been working to identify ways to take the existing rubrics and incorporate those elements. So that is something that the PAOC is also going to be focusing on this year, really taking a lot of that work and putting it into the hands of the people that live those rubrics, right? The counselors, the social workers, the school nurses, and the librarians, because they know what their day-to-day lives are like, and so we want them to have a very large role in that.
Would paras ever be included in something like that as far as?
So not as part of this professional appraisal oversight committee as it relates to the Danielson model. The Danielson model is really a framework for teaching, and so it wouldn't line up. It wouldn't line up in a way that we think would be conducive to all elements of a paraeducator evaluation. But there certainly could be elements of the Danielson model that could be built into a paraeducator model. One of the charges of the Goal 3 team this year is to work with committees and representatives of paraeducators and classified non-contractual staff to redesign and refine the current evaluation systems to provide more effective and professional growth feedback for those groups. And certainly incorporating elements of Danielson would be something that would be beneficial. But just to take those rubrics and just move them over, I don't think that would be completely applicable. But certainly there are elements that would be.
Right, and then just because you mentioned like nursing staff, and I was like, I didn't know if that was like. Also, like, that's not teaching necessarily, so I didn't know if that was how that kind of aligns.
Yeah, absolutely. Danielson does have many rubrics that are related to instructional support roles, but those are mostly from the certified side. Okay. So school nurses, counselors, social workers, librarians, media specialists, even so far as like speech pathologists, OT, PTs, positions that we don't have within our staff. But as it relates to like paraeducator or classified non-contractual roles, it hasn't gone that far.
Yeah, and I just, again, because we talk so much about how the consistency and that same kind of keeping those lines of.
Absolutely.
Of consistency helps our students, helps the community, helps the culture that we're in. And so that's good to know. Right.
Wherever those models end up, we want them to be based on professional growth, which is what our certified model is based on. It's ongoing professional growth.
Cool, thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions regarding the Professional Appraisal Oversight Committee or anything else related to the Goal 3 presentation?
My only question is about EvaluWise. I know that's a fairly popular program we use in our district. I find it very user-friendly and helpful. Do you use that just for teachers, or is that something that you use for administration as well?
Right now, it is just for teachers, but we are not opposed to expanding it out to other work groups as well down the road. I think as we see what model we end up using for our non-certified groups, I've already spoken to EvaluWise and said if they could maybe build a pilot to see how that would work with those as well too, and then ultimately down the road maybe moving towards our administrative evaluations as well too. It's certainly, as Kurt mentioned, it provides, and as you know from working with it, it provides one place to find everything, that effective, that efficient feedback. People know where they're at in the process, which in our old model, which was very much an old-fashioned paper and pencil Microsoft Word type model, that element wasn't there, and so we're very happy with that. And I could say from the support that we are getting from EvaluWise, when we meet as a professional appraisal oversight committee and the division chairs are coming and saying, hey, can we tweak this a little bit? This would be more beneficial if we tried this, or our staff are saying the same things. When I reach out to EvaluWise and I ask them, can we try this, things, they are incredibly receptive, and they'll let us know what they can do, and if they can't, they'll give us some workarounds to try to come up with a way to get to where we're looking. So we've been very pleased with that, and I think, I see it from that 40,000-foot view, but from my conversations with people, when I'm talking to people, I'm always asking them about EvaluWise, I'm always asking them about Red Rover, our absence management system, to try to find out what are the things that are working well, what are the things that are pain points, and trying to resolve those as best we can. And I'm not hearing many from EvaluWise other than, unfamiliarity with the system, because it's brand new to them.
Yeah, we use it for our evaluation of all of our principals, assistant principals, and everything down the line, and it allows for some uniformity in the process, which has been really helpful. So no feedback from teachers, positive or negative, or do you feel like everybody's still kind of learning their way?
Well, I think certainly from the pilot years, we did get a lot of feedback, which helped us refine how we wanted the system to work. Some of the workflows with that, at least from where I sit, and I don't know other members of the committee, or Kurt, you as a division chair, if you've heard any feedback from that negative standpoint, but I certainly haven't, other than how do I do this, or I'm not sure where to find, how do I find this form, right? But those are technical questions that the more you work through it, you can get it. But I do know from my conversations, anecdotally with staff, they're appreciative of seeing where they're at in the cycle, seeing where they're at in terms of, I know I have this unannounced observation that I still need to do, or my evaluation has been planned, the documents have been released, or my observation has been planned, the pre-conference, documents have been released, I can work through that, and there's that sharing of resources. I also know one of the things that has been received very positively is the ability of the system to serve as a repository, for a lack of a better word, of evidence and artifacts that could be part of an evaluation down the road. And our tech coaches really worked with our certified staff members to say, if you're working through something that you think would be beneficial down the road in this process of submitting artifacts and evidence that relate to the domains and components, you can upload it into EvaluWise, and it's right there. And then down the road, you can attach it to a reflection, or you can attach it to one part of the process. And that's been great because it provides, just like Kurt said, everything in one place. It provides that ease of our staff members to be able to do that, where in the past, they certainly could, by having their own folders on their computer or Google Drive, but this makes it very consistent. And it also makes that handoff very consistent too. So if we have a division chair that retires and a new division chair comes in, they're able to then have all of that material, and it doesn't need to be transferred over. It's all right there.
I think the other positive that our teachers have seen, just in our initial observations and the time where we will go back and debrief and talk about the lesson, they really appreciate having that rubric embedded and being able to look at the process objectively and then have a conversation around, okay, this is what we saw, what can we do differently next time in a future lesson to address that area where this went really positive, how can you continue to incorporate that in other areas within future lessons. So they really have appreciated that tie back to the rubric, and they feel like it's a much more objective process this year and moving forward.
And I would just add to that one of the big goals of the PAOC was to refine the system in a way that resulted in higher level feedback. And so early returns are that rubric being embedded, looking at the evidence aligned to the rubric in that moment, and then giving specific feedback on how we could move to the next level of performance is something that we're collectively working on as evaluators, which is division chairs, assistant division chairs, and then myself and our associate principals as well. So that's been really good in the early part. And we've been intentional about the training as well. Tim to your point or your question about EvaluWise, there was a large group session at Opening Institute Day. The DCs all had they had presentations individually within their divisions, but those were developed collectively as a team. And now we're meeting as a group of evaluators monthly just to calibrate our practices, and then using SIP time in order to really allow for staff to dig into the rubrics. So we've developed, that professional learning plan that is sustained throughout the course of the year that hopefully is aligned to the goals of the PAOC and really results in higher level feedback and a system that results in growth, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think the incorporation of the new framework with the SEL in mind and equity in mind, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Feedback that you get after this year. So. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question.
Were there any other questions?
Before we move on, I just wanted to actually back it up a little bit. First, I wanted to say, too, that I was really impressed. Every year we get the opportunity to meet all the new hires and stuff, and this year was no exception, that there were some really amazing people, and it was awesome. But I kind of was questioning, about a year ago, I guess, we probably talked similarly about this topic, and we talked about some of our initiatives in trying to do outreach to our non-white potentially certified staff and all those opportunities. And I think some of them were through some of the college connections and some other things. I was kind of curious if you had any update on like how that was going, if there's any strategy or positioning that we're going to do something different, and just how that's going, because I know that that's been something that we've been trying to reach for.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly something that we have continued when, we use Handshake as probably the largest. It has replaced in many ways job boards or career centers at colleges and universities, so we continue to use that. We continue to use our networks of teachers and colleagues. Oftentimes that is just as great of a recruiter as anything.
Sure.
But I think, we have done a lot of work in our hiring practices to refine the way that we do that, from the screening of candidates from step one all the way through hire, which has made us much more intentional, and I think has really changed our focus. And when you take a look at the demographics of not only staff members that are hired, but staff members that are being brought in for interviews, and the staff members that are applying, I think that has been a tremendous growth and improvement, and that is certainly going to affect. If we're just looking at class or the metrics of staff demographics, that's going to affect it positively, right? But we all know that representation matters, and so having staff members of color in front of our students in our communities, in our buildings, is going to have a very positive effect. One of the things we want to make sure that we are doing is supporting them as well too when they are here, and so we have partnered with Teach Plus to provide some training to our staff members or to our administrative team on how to support staff members of color. We just had some meetings with an outside executive coach about supporting staff members of color, and she worked with our affinity group. So all of those things, we know that getting people in the door is certainly great, but supporting people when they're here is just as important, if not more important. And so we want to continue to do those things as well too. Dr. Rowe, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
And I think even just looking at having, Dr. Waterman, I just did a presentation with superintendent candidates, and I think when we think of our goal of just being very forward with that, people are noticing that, so I think it's that shift. So overall,
Right.
I really feel like that's been the feedback, like this is a place that we want to be, that we're welcomed. It's evidence in all our goals to every, people.
Right.
So many of our hires will tell us like we saw a position, we looked, and that was a place that I could be, and it's all of our teachers, no matter their identity.
Right.
That those were values that, so we're drawing maybe a different type of teacher candidate, no
Right.
matter their identity. We want them to be able to support and do well for the children that we're serving. So that's been the feedback, no matter who our new teachers have been.
That's great.
It's been very positive.
Good. Yeah.
One of the things that we said, like as Dr. Rowe mentioned, we presented to a Northern Illinois University superintendent cohort. And when you and I presented to the School Board Association back in
Right.
April, the one thing that I will say all the time that's the most important is that we have an explicit goal, we name it, and we're proud of that. We have a board that supports that at the highest level, that we want our teaching staff to represent our student community.
Right.
And so we'll always do that.
Great.
And so
Thank
when we're presenting to other groups, that's the first thing I talk about, because without that, it doesn't happen.
Right.
And in other districts, if they don't have that, it's not happening. And so we're going to be proud that we're in a district that supports that work at the highest level.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that update, too.
Absolutely.
And the last thing I would like to say too is that I think has been those personal relationships that we're having, because I think overall, when people are going outside to college fairs to try to recruit people in, it rarely works. So just like we were working with superintendent candidates, this week I'm going to another, university that's in our area to work with teacher prep candidates. Our Building Inclusive Community conference is building in a whole teacher support, and so we want those teacher candidates to come in and say, this is a place that we want to be.
Good.
And again, all the work that we're doing, I think, is building that. That's how we're going to have that momentum and change, and exactly that piece of not just having people come here, but what will encourage them to stay and feel like they belong.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, stick around.
And that's really a goal of those insight interviews,
Yeah.
to know
Just like
that we
our
started
students.
that with staff members of color, but ultimately we'd like to expand that to all staff, right? We want to know, we certainly find out when a person leaves an organization, what were some of the reasons why they left, but it's just as important to find out why a person is staying, right? Where they feel supported, where they feel we can support them more. And so, the beginning of those insight interviews, and then certainly the expansion of those down the road, is going to be very beneficial to us, just as much as those learning circles will be for the panorama data. This is all just very important information for us to know and be able to take back and build that into our efforts to support our staff members here.
Thank you for doing that. It's really important that the way you are all working together collaboratively. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Kirsten, for coming and
Thanks,
speaking to us
Kurt.
tonight.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
So the next strategic plan update will be November 4th, and that will be Goal 1, which is our academics. Probably a much more lengthy, significant presentation. That'll include standardized assessment, advanced placement, and all Illinois school report data.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to finance. And the first item this evening is the continued conversation regarding future funding for future facilities projects. So just to frame the conversation, this is informational only, no action to be taken tonight or at the next board meeting. At previous meetings, the bid development process and sale process has been discussed at length, as well as outcomes from our meeting with the Village of Willow Springs a few weeks back. So we are going to continue to gather information from our key stakeholders and are also awaiting current project bids, which we think are expected next month, before making any decisions about the property. So Tim, Brian, James, and I met with the Pleasantdale Park District on last Friday, the 27th, September 27th, for just an information gathering discussion. It was a successful meeting in that regard, and the key takeaway is that they want to be involved if the Willow Springs land is developed, given our shared assets are so closely connected. So as a reminder, the Pleasantdale Park District owns about 7 acres of land situated in the middle of the south border of D204's property with frontage on Willow Springs Road. So I'm going to summarize some key points, so forgive me for my lengthy notes, and then ask other people to chime in. So from a vision perspective, the Park District hopes any future development aligns with current zoning. They've paid close attention to community feedback to date as well. They noted that most large-scale developments include green space, so that's an area they would be interested in addressing if the time comes. The board president shared his approach that we are temporary stewards of public assets, and anything that is done should be an asset to benefit the community and the taxpayers. The Park District has been involved in zoning issues with regard to their existing park land, but has not done a new large-scale development in some time. Because of the location of its land, they would like to be involved in discussions concerning the effect on any development. And while they didn't note any timing preference, they did ask about our timing, to which we just reiterated that we are in an information gathering stage. We spent time looking at an aerial printout of the property and talking about traffic access around Pleasantdale Elementary School and White Buffalo Park. So on that note, the meeting with the Pleasantdale School District has been scheduled for October 11th. So traffic will certainly be a topic that we ask about. I've also, just to kind of continue with that, I've reached out to Tri-State Fire Protection District twice without response. So at this point, I'm just going to plan to copy them on any communication, that should happen if we move forward. So all in all, fairly quick but productive meeting with Pleasantdale Park District, and we just agreed to stay in touch. So I'm sure there might be some questions, and I'm happy James is here again tonight as our counsel and subject matter expert. Before discussion opens up, I would just encourage the scope of the conversation to stay focused on clarifying questions and concerns about the Pleasantdale Park District meeting, and I'm very happy to follow up with them if needed. So I don't know if Brian, James, Tim, if you guys want to weigh in on anything else before we field questions.
No, I mean, I was unfortunately not able to be in person, but I was on the phone, and it seemed like there was, just a good reciprocating conversation about the what-ifs and what have yous, and didn't seem very complicated. It was, let's sit down and have a conversation about the what-ifs.
I would agree. Very straightforward.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
Yeah, nothing really to add. I mean, I
Okay.
think that was an accurate representation of the discussion, so.
I don't know if anybody has any questions.
That seemed positive, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that was my takeaway from your notes, and
Yeah,
we had said today.
yeah. It was positive and just, like I said, just let's stay in touch. I mean, it's so closely connected, and just where their land is, just smack in the middle there. I mean, that would be the expectation.
Thanks for doing it.
All right, there you go. Well, like I said, we have another meeting this Friday, and that'll, I think, probably be the last one of the key players that we wanted to meet with. And then we'll have bid conversations next month, and we'll kind of see where it all goes from there.
Just to clarify on that, so they'll be distributed probably in the next 2 months, but
Okay.
we won't be asking the board to consider awarding a bid till, Brian, what's the best guess on that?
Well, I think it's probably,
The holidays.
I think,
Oh, okay.
or maybe even into January, not exactly sure, the
Oh, I
timeline
thought
of
we were
this.
getting it in
So they're
November.
gonna be
I
on
thought
the
we were
street
getting
in
two
November?
earlier, too.
Or December, and we'll
Right.
get them back December, January.
Okay, thank you for
Right.
clarifying
Yeah.
that. Okay.
But still, work would
Okay.
be done this summer.
Oh, yeah.
Still aligned to our
Yes.
timeline.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
All right. All right, well, we'll just keep going.
Yeah.
You got it. All right, well, thanks,
Thank
James.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Good night.
James. Take care.
All right, so then our next item is an insurance update, including an implementation of an HMO medical plan. Brian Stasiak.
Thank you, President Gretz. Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to take a moment here just to kind of familiarize you again with our medical insurance that we provide for the employees here in the district. You've heard me say this many times during budget discussions that we are self-insured. And so what that means is we do not buy first dollar insurance. We don't go to Blue Cross and say, give us your best plan, or to Humana and give us this plan, that sort of thing, right? We are self-insured. So what that means is we contract with Blue Cross, Blue Shield in this case, to provide us with a network. And then inside of that network, we will look at the different options and different plans that we want to make available to our staff members, okay? And so also, again, the district, you've heard me say this many times, is responsible for paying the claims. Now, there is a premium that is generated When we do that every year, this time of the year, we generate a premium based on what we need from each person in order to run the entire program for that year. The board is responsible for paying 78% of the total cost for the plan, and then the employees 22%. And so that just kind of gives you this 50,000 quick view of how our plan operates. And again, as I said, currently we have 3 plans that we operate within our medical insurance. One is a traditional PPO plan. We also have a high deductible plan that was added in January of 2016, and the reason that was added was to meet the affordability component of the Affordable Care Act. And then we've also had the other plan that has been around a long time with the PPO is a Blue Choice Select plan. And so the Blue Choice Select plan it has a little bit more of a restricted network to it. So it does function similarly to an HMO, but not quite exactly like an HMO. And so those are the 3 plans that we've had now since 2016. And again, the other 2, the PPO and the Blue Choice Select plan, since I don't know how long it's been, much longer than I've been here in the district. And so one of the questions came around last year when we meet with our insurance committee. One of the questions was, hey, can we look at adding the potential of an HMO plan? We said, sure, we'll look at it. We weren't going to be able to implement it last year for January 1st of 2024, but we said, let's look at it for implementation in January of 2025. And as it works out, working with our brokers at Cottingham and Butler, they are actually highly recommending that we do implement this HMO plan. And the reason that they're doing it, first of all, is because overall it saves the entire plan money. One of the bullet points that I noted down here is if you take in the HMO, if you take the same service that you would be provided under the PPO, the cost of that is about 20% less than what it would be under the PPO. So that saves the entire plan additional dollars, which is beneficial to us and beneficial to the employees, quite frankly, as well. And so, our brokers are saying, yes, we would highly recommend that you look at adding this plan. Now it is an HMO. There are some, there's some real nice benefits with it. But as we all know, I don't want to call them drawbacks, but there are additional sort of steps that you have to go through when you're obtaining, medical assistance. And so, first of all, when you have a plan like this, you want to make it attractive for employees to get into that plan. And so essentially, when you look at this, for example, there'd be no deductibles under this particular plan, right? And so when you look at the deductibles under the PPO, for example, for single coverage, it's $450 for the year. For single plus one, it's $900 for the year. And for family coverage, it's $1,350 per year. So that's the deductibles on the PPO. And again, under this particular plan, there would be no deductibles. In addition to that, the premiums, the annual premium for the plan, we're looking to get it at least as low as what the high deductible plan is, and maybe even lower than that potentially. We're still working on getting that information together. I'm very hopeful that we would have that for the board for the October meeting, that we could kind of talk through, what that premium looks like as well. Of course, this is a restricted network, right? You have to be in network. So where in the PPO, for example, the other plans, if you're in network, of course, you have whatever coverage is specified. And if you're out of network, you still have coverage that is specified. Under the HMO plan, there is no coverage outside of the network. So you have to be cautious of that as a consumer of your insurance. And then, of course, anybody who would get in this plan, the typical process, again, it is a restricted network, but that typical process is you have to go through your primary care provider first, and then obtain their advice, and then move on to any additional medical treatment after that. And so generally, like I said, in addition to that, the network would include, we believe, all of the major hospitals in the Chicago area. As I said, the rates are still being developed. And really, one of the main reasons for the implementation for this program is to save employees have them have a good medical plan, save them some money, and save the plan overall some money as well. And so if the board was to approve this plan, it would take effect January 1st of 2025, which is when our renewal year for our medical insurance begins. And so, again, we're not asking for any approval tonight. We would be asking potentially for approval of this plan and during the regular October board meeting. And again, the last plan that we added was back in January of 2016 when we added the high deductible plan, which also is a really good plan as well. In particular, if you're young and very healthy, which is good because if you're looking at getting into our plans, and we discuss this with new employees when they come on, if you're going into the PPO and you're healthy, generally speaking, and you're younger, because we all know that as you get older, you don't see the doctor less, you generally see the doctor more. But in those situations, you're much better off to be in that high deductible plan, because covering yourself into the PPO when this year you might go to the doctor a couple times because you get the flu, your annual checkup, those types of things. If you're in the PPO, you're way over covering and you're paying for coverage that you're never even going to use in that particular plan. So we talk with the employees. Julianne Swift in my office, benefits coordinator, does all of that as the employees are onboarded. And, we don't tell them what to do, but we certainly, if they ask us, and we'll give them advice on how to move forward, potentially with those. And the pros and cons of all of those different plans. So, again, this came out of our insurance committee. We think it's very beneficial to the district to add this HMO option. The one point I would make is that back when we added the high deductible plan, we talked about the Blue Choice Select plan as a plan that we potentially would phase out over time. It has become our most expensive of all three of the existing plans, and would be, of course, the most expensive of all four plans. So what we did in 2016 is we said, well, let's go down this path of if you're in, you stay in, that's fine. However, no one else will be allowed to get into that plan. So they would be in the PPO or the high deductible plan. So at this particular point, we have an employee enrollment in the Blue Choice Select plan of 22 employees in that plan. So like I said, we've looked at potentially, as we move down this road, potentially adding this HMO, that the Blue Choice Select plan, as those people start to cycle out, then the 22 remaining, as they start to continue to cycle out, we would get down to, I don't know what the number is, maybe 5 or 10 people left, and we would say, look, next year we're going to terminate this plan, so you'll have some options, or you'll have the other 3 options. You'll need to make a decision on where you might want to move in those plans. But again, we haven't added anybody new to that plan since 2015. So it's kind of phasing out, and so we think this might be a real nice option to replace it with. And not even so much replace it, but with the phase out, have a similar option plus the other 2 options available to the employees as well. And so, again, in 2015, when we added the high deductible plan, we did ask the board's permission and ask for approval to do that. And so that's the same process that we're following here, that we would ask the board to approve the addition of this HMO plan. That being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
I've just got one question. I'm just curious if the numbers are low for the Blue Choice Select, have you considered having any sort of conversation with that select group of 22? I mean, are they aware that there's an HMO possibility that's even going to be out there?
Not yet.
It's being proposed, they're not aware of
Right,
that
not yet.
Okay.
This just came from the insurance committee.
Okay.
We wanted to obviously talk to the board about it. And then what we will do is we will have our annual open enrollment coming up the last week in October.
Right.
First week in November. And so our plan would be to, after the board, of course, would approve potentially at the October meeting, then we would put out all those materials,
Understood.
including those on the HMO, to the employees. To your point, do we think we're going to see a huge migration in the first year? No, we don't.
Okay.
We didn't have a huge migration of people into the high deductible plan either in the first year. So I think that the savings is sort of, tempered in the first couple of years, but as people start to realize, hey, this is a nice option.
Yeah.
The word gets out, we'll have more people moving over there as we go through time. I don't think
Okay.
that we'll see a huge migration in the first year.
Okay, that answers my question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who is on the insurance committee?
So we have representatives from the different work groups in the district.
Okay.
So it would be, of course, I'm on the insurance committee. Julianne Swift, our benefits coordinator, is on the insurance committee. Then we have representatives from the paras, the certified staff, building and ground staff, the, who else do we have out there?
Classified non-contractual.
Yeah,
right?
classified, non-contractual staff
Great.
members. And so that group is made up of at least one and sometimes two representatives from those organizations.
Okay, great. How often are you guys meeting? I guess I'm just wanting to get a little bit more background on that.
So really, the bulk of the work is done here in the fall.
Okay.
However, if we have to meet like in April because something else is coming up, or we want to get an early, discussion point about, last year, for example, we changed, we added a little bit more of a restrictive drug program to the PPO, because we pretty much had an open program. We added that in last year. The committee said, yeah, that's a great idea, and I think this year our savings is up to about almost $300,000 already, just because of what we added last year. So we may bring some of that stuff earlier, but typically it's very active in the fall, because right now we're talking about any plan design changes, a new plan in HMO, plus the new rates. We'll have the new rates developed and out here probably within the next couple of weeks as well. So that's when we bring all of that information. We've already had one meeting for this year. Our next meeting is planned, I believe, for October 17th. And so we'll be talking about that additional information, rates and all that, what will be happening for the coming year, effective January 1st.
And then that's provided to employees as an open enrollment.
Correct.
Phase, like what's that, 2 weeks about for when they can make a decision or?
Yes, so we will get all of that information out to them immediately, like I said, after the board meeting here. We have already put information out about, hey, get ready, open enrollment's coming. You will, here's the time period. It's the only time period of the year that you can make those changes, unless, of course, you have what they call a qualifying event, birth, marriage, divorce, any of those kinds of things. And so we will bombard the employees with that information over the next couple of weeks. We will bombard them during the open enrollment and all the way up until the day before it ends.
Yeah,
Hey,
of
last
course,
chance, here it
of
comes.
course.
Get us your information if you want to make any changes. So we will do that coming up.
And then my last question, what is the percentage of employees that we have that take advantage of our insurance?
So
Roughly?
81%
Oh.
of roughly
That's a lot.
500.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
that's a lot.
our coverage is good.
Right.
And so the plan is good. The premiums certainly are good for the employees at the 78.22, and the coverage within those plans is good. And so, just to give you some quick numbers, total employees who are eligible in the district are 558, and we have 450 who participate in our plan. Again, we have 22 in the Blue Choice Select Plan at this time. Now, this is just employees. This doesn't cover dependents and all that sort of thing. This is just employees. 22 there, 388 in the PPO, which you would expect, and 40 in the high deductible plan. And again, there's advantages to each one of those plans that are different depending on, what you're looking for. In the high deductible plan, we offer an HSA, so we're having, giving people some dollars to an HSA account that they can utilize this year, or as an HSA account goes, you can utilize it 50 years from now if that's what you want to do with it. And so, there are incentives in all of those plans, but like I said, that's the number that we have there. And so roughly 81% of our eligible employees are participating in our plans here.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I just have a question for number 5. It says users will be required to confirm that their healthcare providers are in the HMO network.
Right.
So how are you checking to confirm that? Because it just seems like a HIPAA violation that you're having them do that you're requiring them to do that.
They're doing it on their own. So what would happen is if you decide, you're going to go in and you're going to look at our network online, and you're going to look at the doctors that are available in there. And so if you're going to confirm, you would do it. I wouldn't do it.
That's why I just want to make sure there's
Yeah.
they're not oh, my doctor's Dr. Smith, and then you confirm.
Not at
So
all.
there's a box for them to check, so they could change providers if they want it. It doesn't, there's, that, it just made me like, oh,
Yeah.
like that was a
No.
lot of information we would be getting as a.
Not at
So
all.
it's the I mean, maybe you could change it to say, it's, users' obligation to,
Sure.
is responsibility, maybe responsibility to confirm that their healthcare providers
Yeah.
are in the age, not, instead of required,
Yeah.
because somebody might want to change it. That
Yeah.
just seems like it's,
They aren't going to bring any of that information to us at all. Although I will tell you, they do ask that question of Julianne at times. They'll volunteer and say, hey, look, I'm looking for this. Can you help me out with this or whatever the case
I would
may
just
be.
feel like more, like, just instead of
But
required, it's,
It's not required for them to bring it to us. It's required for them to do it because, again, if you,
It's not even I wouldn't even say it's required. I mean, it's their option. They could just sign up for it, and then it would be their responsibility for it.
That's
That's
true.
where I guess I'm struggling with that language. I mean, I understand how it works, like, you'd want to confirm before you went to the HMO.
Right.
But it wouldn't be that they're required to do it. It should be their best. It would be a great option
Required
for
for
them to do that.
coverage.
yeah, I think that's fair.
even think
I
it's
think the only
required for
reason I
coverage.
use the word required there is because with the HMO, if they don't land in the network, then there's no
Right.
coverage.
Then-
Correct.
There's no
Well, I understand,
So-
but
Yeah.
they could change a healthcare provider. Do you know what I'm saying for
Sure,
that? Because it's-
absolutely.
So I would just say, they're,
Yeah.
it's their,
It's your right, it's a responsibility.
right. I just think the word like required makes me a little,
Sure,
lawyer
we
and me a
can,
little
we can,
stressed.
we can change that. They don't have to do it, and if they
That's on
don't,
them.
then it's on them.
Right, so
That's
it's not
fine.
like, okay, that would just make me feel,
Change the language
okay,
in
thanks,
the
sorry
memo.
about that.
Sure,
To be nitpicky.
no worries.
My only question is about, and I'm sure this is, if at all, years and years down the road, but it's really interesting because our IASBA resolution number 5 for what we're going to be voting on here pretty soon is the idea of a central management in the state of Illinois for a unified healthcare plan across the state. And I can read that if you want, but it's, would that have, so it's to be resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support changes that require the Illinois Department of Central Management Services to create a unified health plan for school districts, opt in to provide equitable insurance coverage for all school staff across the state of Illinois. I'm sure I know the answer, but I just want to be clear, like, if we were to adopt this new method, it wouldn't have any impact on what this resolution or future potential impact if that were to become something that were to sort of
No,
come to fruition.
Only if we
No.
opted into that.
yeah, if we opted into that plan, of course, we would, I'm not even gonna go into that, but let's just put it this way. As Dr. Waterman said, yes, if we opt into that, we can opt into that, and then we would have to close out all of our plans, which would be a long process, tedious process, because you'll have claims out there for years, even after, you close it out. So, but that will not have any bearing on what we decide to do here, or if we decide to do anything there in the future.
That's a good question, yeah. I was thinking of that too. Yeah.
Interesting timing, I guess.
And the resolutions are always about supporting,
Non-binding.
legislation.
Non-binding,
Right.
right. It's
not-
Right.
yeah, it doesn't
advocacy for
actually make the
legislation.
law or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah,
but
that, I have not heard
that's a
anything
good
about that.
question, 'cause, right, like, then are we in conflict with it? But,
I've not heard anything about that, but that sounds to me, as they said, opt-in, that sounds to me like they would have this plan available, and if you choose to keep your own medical plans, you can continue to do that as well. Like
Yeah,
you'd have
it is,
either
yeah.
option, if that's what you wanted to do.
cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thanks.
So that will come back on October 21st.
That will come back on October 21st for a vote for approval
Great.
from the board.
Well, thanks for making sure that we have appropriate and varied options for our employees. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, well, we're going to continue with you, an informational item regarding the tax levy.
Yes, thank you, President Gretsch. So, okay, here we go. This is our first look at the 2024 tax levy. And so, first of all, when we say 2024 tax levy, that is correct. It's because that we always pay, in Cook County, you always pay your, anywhere essentially, you pay your property taxes in arrears, a year in arrears. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, I believe it's your page 18. I kind of want to focus on the chart at the top of that page there, because that's going to really get us to the point of understanding why we're doing what we're doing for this particular levy. And then we'll talk a little bit about, potentially where we're going to put those dollars in the individual funds. There is nothing tonight to vote on. This is just the first look at this. It won't be back at the October meeting, but it will be back in November, probably at both meetings. We will need an approval for the tentative levy, estimated levy in November, and then in December, we have to adopt the final levy. So this is just kind of an early look at this so that you get the opportunity to digest everything that's going on here and then have the ability to take a look and answer questions or ask questions at future meetings. So I want to start right at the top of the chart there, and I'm going to kind of take you through how we develop essentially a couple of factors here. A tax rate, and also a dollar amount that becomes the maximum dollar amount that we can levy in next year in that 2024 levy. So if you look at the top box up there, you'll see that the prior 2023 tax year aggregate extension in our operating funds was $81,984,000. Okay? The consumer price index in December of 2023, so we even go back to that year, was 3.4%. So we are tax capped, or property tax extension limitation law is the full name for it, but we call it tax caps for short. The tax cap says that the district can raise its aggregate levy, so the total dollar amount, by the lesser of 5% or the CPI from that year. You may recall the last 2 years, we had CPI numbers that were higher than 5%, but we were capped at that 5%. So that was in December of 21 and December of 22. December of 23, the number is 3.4%. So all we can do is raise our aggregate levy, total dollar amount, by 3.4%. That number appears on the far right-hand side as $84,771,000. So that's our new total dollar amount on existing property, okay? We're going to talk about the new property here coming up in just a second. So that's a known number. That's not going to change. Here's where the guesswork comes in. When we start to look at our equalized assessed valuation for the district, I have to take a reasonable guess at two numbers. First is what we think the overall EAV, or equalized assessed valuation, of the entire district, all the property in the district, is going to be. Secondly, we have to then say, okay, how much do we think the new property is going to be in the district? The reason that number is separate is because any dollar amount attributable to new property is not subject to the tax cap in the first year. So it's really imperative that we obtain all of those dollars on that new property in the first year that it's available to us. And so typically what we'll do with that, and you'll see right in the middle there, projected new property, $60 million. Do I think we're going to get $60 million? I don't. But that should cover us for any dollar amount that we will get. Last year's was close to $40 million. So that was a good year. But again, we want to make sure that we're capturing all of that. So now we're going to talk about kind of going back, and we're going to develop what we call the limiting rate, the tax rate. And so the projected EAV for 2024 is $4,162,919,000. Okay? That's actually down from what it was last year. Historically, when you have the year after a triennial in Cook County, a triennial reassessment, that our EAV will actually go down a few percentage points. So we're assuming that. Then we're assuming that $60 million of new property, you add that back to that number that I just gave you, and you get a new EAV with the new property of $4,222,919,000, okay? So this now is a number that we're going to use when we get down to the last set of columns. So we develop our limiting rate now in this next calculation. We take our new aggregate extension, the $84,771,000, so that's last year's plus the 3.4%. We divide it by our projected EAV without the new property of $4,162,000,000, and we come up with a limiting rate of 2.0363. Okay? Now, please remember, I'm guessing at this. I'm trying to make it well-educated guess, but none of it will I know until we actually receive the final levy documentation in June or July of 2025, and we have to turn this in December of 2024. Right. So again, we're trying to make some educated guesses on this. So now we take that number, the 2.0363, and now we multiply that against that total EAV with the new property now, of the $4,222,919,000, and that gets us a total aggregate levy extension of $85,993,338. So adding a little over $1 million of new property to that levy, if in fact it's at $60 million. Okay? Is everybody with me so far? Okay, great, good. All right, so what does that do for us? Well, let's go on to page 20. So now you're going to see this in this spreadsheet form, and again, this takes into account everything that we just talked about and lays it out in numbers. So what we're going to do here is, again, you can see those numbers at the top, projecting a 5.73% decrease in the EAV. On line 6, the total EAV change, because that's typically what will happen to us in that year after a triennial reassessment. Now, if you go just below that, beginning on line 8, same column there, essentially, column D, you'll see the projected rates for each one of the individual funds that we operate with, and there's that magic number of 2.0363 at the bottom in aggregate, okay? You see that on line 24. I'm sorry, line 23. So each one of those individual rates for fund adds up to the 2.0363, which we know how we calculated that number. Then here's our 2023. If you go over to column F, our 2023 extension, the $81,984,000. Add 3.4% to that, $84,771,529. The increase there is $2,787,000. And then we go into our new property number here of $1,221,809, and that gets us back to our number of the $85,993,338. So that means that we would be at a 4.89% increase in total for the 2024 levy. The law in Illinois says that we are required to have a truth and taxation hearing anytime the ask is for more than 5%. We are not asking for more than 5% here. However, the history of this board has always been to have a truth and taxation hearing, regardless of whether we're at 5% or less, above 5% or less. So my recommendation would be that we go ahead and still have the truth and taxation hearing, advertise in the newspaper, and put the information up on the website, and still do that. So the top portion there, again, on line 23, gives you the totals for all of our operating funds. Down below, then on line 28, we add in the bond and interest fund. The bond and interest fund is separate because, as you may recall, we don't do anything else with that bond and interest fund other than it's a flow-through. Money comes in and then goes out to pay for our bond obligations. There's nothing else that happens in that account. There's no other expense, there's no transfers. It's just a revenue and it's an expense for really one item, and that's it, okay? So, and that is pulled out separately here because it is under, and we'll have a supplemental levy this year as we've had in the past. It's a separate individual levy, but I'm adding it in here so you see that the total numbers are what they are. And so if you look down on line 31 all the way across, including bond and interest, the 2024 proposed levy would be $88,928,557. And that is a $3,992,000 increase over the prior year, which is 4.7%. So again, on both accounts, we are not required to have that truth and taxation hearing, but I think we would go ahead and do that anyway. The only other point that I want to make right now is that in column H, where we start on line 12, so you'll see there, for example, I have a levy in the education fund of $69,821,529, right? I'm going to continue to look at those numbers. I think what's going to end up happening is I think I'm going to end up reducing our transportation levy. I have it at $1,750,000 right now. We have probably about $5 million worth of fund balance in there. And really that money is going to have to be used for transportation purposes. So what I foresee happening here potentially is that I would lower that levy. We might run a deficit in the transportation fund in next year's budget, and that's perfectly fine. We're just going to spend down some of that money that's built up as far as the surplus goes in that particular fund. Now, That does not mean that we're going to levy less money than the $84,771,000. Whatever I would remove from the transportation fund, I would probably put back into the ed fund or the O&M fund. So it's just simply by fund that we might, maneuver those numbers around a little bit, but the recommendation would still be to levy the total increase of 3.4% of $84,771,000. Okay, that's a lot of information, I know. I'm happy to answer any questions on this part of it. There's a couple more parts we'll just briefly touch on here in a second, but so far, any questions?
It's very well explained, thank you.
Thank you.
It does feel like I'm in a class,
I've-
and I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I feel like now this is my third year through and I'm
I know,
finally
getting it.
I feel like I'm up to a D. No, I'm just kidding.
Up to a D. You're passing.
Which is awesome.
Good.
I used to have to try to catch up to where
Good.
you were, but now I think I'm actually getting
Well-
either ahead or definitely keeping pace.
Sometimes I'm glad somebody said we're in class because sometimes the teacher in me still comes out,
love
even
it.
on these things.
I
So-
always appreciate it.
I totally appreciate it, and I understood it all, so I was just kidding about it. I was at a D. I feel like I'm acing it. I'm not going to go A+, but I feel like
Good.
you've done a great job. So, but I do have a question, though, that maybe extends beyond this. Just with regard to the fund and the allocation within the funds, when do we as a board then, if you were going to change your fund allocations, when would we as a board in the process throughout the year vote on that?
That will be done in November and December.
Okay.
It will not be changed after December. So when I look at these, again, as I said, this is an early look. The aggregate numbers are going to stay the same. None of that's going to change. If we go with the 60 million as new property, and we already know that we're capped at 3.4%. So I would bring back, in November, I'll bring back something that has any changes to it that would be completed, and that would be it. There won't be any more changes to it after November.
Okay, and then I know so then when you're talking about the transportation fund, that you wouldn't put that whole 1.75, like 1,750,000
Right.
into that? Okay, so I know in the past, wasn't there one time that we voted to change money from one fund to another? Carrie's nodding, do you know what I mean? Like,
That
it was, there was,
It's your permission ahead of time if you needed to move something.
so we can move, I mean, theoretically, okay, I'm just
Yeah.
trying,
Yeah.
it's very abstract, I feel, but let's just say,
Yeah.
we put that full amount into the transportation fund, and we had now 5 million, I don't remember exactly what
Yeah.
you said, but it'd be probably about 5 million then.
Right.
In the transportation fund, which we wouldn't need that full amount.
Right.
Then we as a board theoretically could, because if it has, I mean, I guess my thing over, if there's so much excess in one of the fund balances,
Yeah.
is that when we're looking for more funding to come, do you know what I mean, for things that,
Fully understand your question.
okay, I was, I haven't
Yeah,
even
fully
finished it, but you're
understood.
reading my mind, so I appreciate that.
And so let me tell you,
Does that make sense? Like,
It does.
this is, I mean, when we're looking at funding sources, we haven't
It
talked
does.
about this I don't want to say depleting,
Yeah.
because I don't want it to be at a zero, but.
yeah, it's
Looking
a
at
great
fund
question.
balances.
So let me answer that the best that I can.
Okay,
So it's a bit confusing. The state allows us, and the governor has signed into law, I forget what the actual public act is, but allows for us to transfer money between the three operating funds, the ed fund, O&M, and transportation. Okay? However, here's the however. A few years ago, there was an amendment to the Constitution in the state of Illinois that was generally directed at the General Assembly. And basically said to the General Assembly, you cannot take money that's to be used for transportation purposes and put it toward other projects that you may want to do that with, okay?
okay.
Right now, there are questions out there about whether that actually pertains to school district transportation funds or not. So the safest way to go with this is to do what we're doing here, or what I'm proposing is to say, look, let's not put as much money into the transportation fund.
Okay.
Let's move that money out someplace else, because the education fund and the O&M fund are not subject to that transportation
Got it.
amendment at all. So we know we can move the money between those two funds and then move it into the capital projects fund if we have to.
Well, that's where I'm
Right.
getting to, because then that makes sense. So then if we were to theoretically take 2 years.
Right.
Okay, so like, what was the amount, the excess that you had, like 3.5 or something like that? In the in the transportation?
No, it's going to
fund?
be probably close to $5 million at the end of 2024, FY '24.
Okay, so if we have that large excess, maybe over 2 years, I mean, if I'm understanding this correctly, over 2 years, we don't put any funding into the transportation fund, we could then move that then into a capital fund and get us more, like 3 or 4 million.
Right. Essentially what you're doing is you're just simply saying, we're not going to fully fund the transportation fund with the levy.
Because we're going to use our savings in
We're
there.
going to spend that money down. We're going to then move that money out to the other funds. And then if it's not used in those other funds, it's basically the same thing that's happening, that you'll have the surplus in there instead, and then you can move that out of the ed fund and the O&M fund into the capital projects.
So I think this is key for us as a board then to consider and think about this, because I know in the past when we've talked about funding sources, it's been, how much do we have excess each year? But so theoretically, we could have more excess in the years coming up without, with moving funds around and not contributing to the transportation fund.
I think you'll have the same. I don't think it's going to, I don't think it's
That's
going-
what I'm like looking to see. So
Yeah,
it's not
I
going to be
don't- I
like,
don't- yeah,
I
it-
found $2 million here.
Yeah, no, I don't
For
think.
refund, I don't even like
All our
that.
costs go up too, right? Like, it's all,
Right.
that CPI.
But this is, but like the education fund's accounting for that then. But this isn't like found money.
That's
for
right.
us. Okay.
There's nothing new there. Really, essentially, what you're doing is you're saying, is you're going to say, look.
great.
I was like, I don't know. Like,
If you think
I wasn't
about,
fully understanding
if
it,
you,
so
if you
thank
think
you.
about the budget form, it is excellent question. If you think about the budget form, we account by each one of these funds: ed,
Right.
O&M, transportation, all the way down the line. And so, what would end up happening here is we say, look, we're only going to put $1 million in the transportation fund this year, and we pick up about $1 million in state funding. So we know that we would have about $2 million worth of revenue in that fund. And our expenses are going to probably be $3.2 million. I'm just kind of, let's call it $3.5 million. So we would spend down $1.5 million and show, and essentially on the budget form, we would show a deficit of $1.5 million in that fund. But then the money that we didn't put in there would have gone over to the ed fund or the O&M fund. So that's picking up the difference of the $1.5 million.
And then
that-
the excess of that is what we use for the capital project.
That's correct.
So it's not like there's a way we can finagle this to get more money for the capital projects.
No.
Okay.
No, it's your net is still zero in terms
Okay,
of.
it just seemed like when you were like, there's
what's
this
happening
excess,
there.
we hadn't talked about it. I
Yeah,
got all
if,
excited.
let's put it this way, if you were to have $1 million surplus, the way that we're doing it now, you would also have $1 million surplus if we did it this way in future, the other way in future
Got it.
years.
So
Yep, none of that changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you for that. What?
Yeah.
Well, I was just like, we haven't discussed
I like
like.
I like the thought process.
No, but we hadn't discussed like excess in the funds. We were talking
Right.
about our general fund balance, but we hadn't ever discussed the excess like in the education, the O&M, and the transportation as funding we could use for capital projects. Right. So
Right.
that's where I was trying to understand, and
Yep.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions on this?
The $60 million for new property that we're projecting, you said last year, was it 44, 40 million, somewhere?
It was 40 million, 39 million, 552.
Okay. Do we feel like we captured all, I know it's our responsibility to find that new property, right?
Yep.
Do we feel like we've captured all of it?
I know we captured all of it.
You know we captured
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason I know that is because there is, if you go to page 24, okay?
I'm on the PDF, I'm always on the board docs. so
Okay,
1 through 8, but I'll figure
So
it out.
I'm looking at,
23 in the.
which one do I have? Yeah, that's it, 23, and then go to page, yeah, it's 24 on board docs.
Okay.
Got it.
And if you look, if you look on the right-hand side, go down to the bottom, you'll see an asterisk on that document that says clerk's reduction factor, 96.7758, right? So I know from that number, because it's less than 1, that, or I guess 100, I guess in this case, that we captured everything, because the Cook County actually had to reduce our levy by 3.2% and some change there, okay? If that number was ever above 1, then you know you didn't capture everything in the first year. Yeah. Sure. So, yeah, so I know that we captured everything in that first year. Just quickly, a couple of other points on the page, actually after my spreadsheet there, that we just were talking about previous to this. You'll see a 6-year history of the levy. And so I go back to 2018 to give you those 6 years of history, and then essentially in column H there, in the column that's gray, that's the proposed for this year. So you can kind of see how the percentage changes between, CPI, new property. Just to give you a quick look at that, if you look at the new property on line 6 there, in tax year 2018, it was $25,024,000. Then we're at 35, almost 36 million, 41.8, and then we had a real down year in 2021 of 7.8 million. Then we jumped back up to 21, and then back up to almost 40 million again last year. So, and then you can that's the way that this reads. You can look at all of those items as you go through them. And the reason I give 6 years is because in Cook County, it's a triennial cycle. So 3 years, 1 year north, the North Cook County is assessed, then Chicago, then south. So the 2 tax years in yellow there, 20 and 23, were the years when we were reassessed on the south side of Cook County. And so that's why I put 6 years in there. It's kind of an odd number, but for that purpose, it at least gives you a look at 2 triennials, and you can say what was going on there and what was happening, and you can, again, follow that across. That'll show you everything in terms of the history. The only thing that's not completely valid is because in tax year 2024, you'll notice that both, if you go down to like line 19 and line 21, those 2 numbers are the same right now because we don't know what the actual number is going to be. We're just using what we've calculated at the 85,993,000 and then moving that forward to the actual. It's not actual yet. It'll be actual when I finally get the documents in June, July, August of 2025. So that's the only, and the same would be true of the one below there, even though something happened to one of my lines there on line 24. So the 88,928,000, that'll be the same number. But if you look in the prior years, you'll see what we actually advertised and then how much different we were. So if you stay on that line 24, last year we advertised that the proposed total extension was $85,091,000. Our final extension was $84,936,000. So we were really pretty close in terms of where we ended up. The last document, quickly, I just want to show you is a document that kind of looks at the actual tax bill, right? Keep in mind, this only takes into account the portion of the tax bill that is paid to Lyons Township High School District 204. This does not take into account any other increases because I don't know what those tax rates are, what their levies are going to be, so I don't even hazard a guess on any of that. This simply talks about what this would look like to a homeowner, and you'll see that I have essentially four varying, points of purchase for a home, right? So if you look in column A and B, that's a home that has a market value of $1,167,000, which, again, in this community, we have those. And all the way down throughout, if you follow that across, we have one that's $776,000, property 3 at $470,000, and then property 4 at $182,000. So just some varying points to see what this looks like. And so I won't go into all of the calculation on this, but I do know that this spreadsheet works because I actually take employees' tax bills, they bring them to me, I run them through this, and it calculates exactly what last year's was perfectly. Now, again, we're making some assumptions here. One of the assumptions, of course, is the tax rate that we would have. And then also on that, we're also looking at the total tax rate, and then we're also assuming what the multiplier is. So I'm not hazarding a guess on that. I'm just simply keeping it static from what we know the multiplier was in 23. We're keeping the same multiplier, the 3.0163 for 2024. And so if you follow all the way through on those, what you would see is that we would expect that the home at about $1,167,000 would pay about $200 more for the entire year to Lyons Township High School District 204 for that levy. And then again, the next one, $126, $68, and then $13. Again, there's some guesswork in here, but I don't think that we're too far off. It also The other thing it also does is it keeps everything constant. And I always remind the board this, that even though our aggregate levy would go up by 3.4% on existing homes, that does not mean that every property takes only a 3.4% increase. What that means is the total dollar amount, right, the $84 million, that becomes the pie. And so you can have within the district, we might have one pocket of the district that doesn't go down by 5%, but they go up 3%. We can have another pocket of the district that goes down 7%, right, in their property value. So if you go up 3 and somebody goes down 7, well, the 3 is going to have to take on more of the pie, and the 7 is going to take on less of the pie. It's just kind of how it works. So that part of the assessment process with the county and township assessors, we don't control any of that. There's nothing to do with us. If everybody went down by our projection here, the 5.7%, whatever the case may be, then this would all hold exactly true. But that's not what actually is going to happen. There's going to be variations in those assessments. We don't control those. And so it would be impossible to say that, yeah, everybody's going to only go up by 3.4%. Some may go down. Some may go up higher than 3.4%. But that all depends on the assessment variations of each individual property, the areas of the communities that are rising, some, who knows? But that's how that works. So I just want everybody to understand that it's not 3.4%, and that's all everybody is going to see.
Thank you. And I always appreciate seeing the comps.
Yeah.
Makes it sink in and makes it real, so thank you
It
for
does.
that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Brian, can you talk about what's going to happen between now and the next?
Yeah.
And like play this process out through December?
Sure. And so one final piece, you have, those 2 pages underneath the property taxes calculation, that is our actual levy document from Cook County for 2023. So you can follow all of that through. That's where I pulled all my numbers from and move all of those forward. So you can look at that on your own, and if you have any questions, you can let me know at a future time. That being said, so what we'll do is, I just wanted to introduce this tonight, as we typically do in October at the committee meetings. Nothing will come back at the October regular meeting. I'm going to continue to work with this in the next month. I will essentially bring back what I believe will be a final version of the levy to the committee of the whole meeting in November, just for a look again for the board. We would adopt the estimated levy then at the November meeting. We have to do that at least 20 days before we adopt the final levy in December. Then we'll bring it back one final time to the committee of the whole. If there's any changes, probably won't be any changes from that in December. And then we have to adopt the levy, the final levy, in December at the December board meeting, because I have to have it submitted to the county no later than the last Tuesday in December. If we don't submit it by then, they have no obligation to extend the tax levy for us. And at $85 million, that would be devastating to the district. So we need to make sure we're ready to go for that last Tuesday in December, which this timeline, no issues. In addition to that, what will end up happening is, we talked about the truth and taxation hearing. So we will be publishing in the newspaper no less than 7 and no more than 14 days before the December board meeting. That's required by statute. We will hold a public hearing at the December meeting. We don't need one in November, but we will in December. And then we'll hold a public hearing and then adopt the final levy in December. And again, once I bring this back to you in November, I don't anticipate any changes after that. That should, unless I obtain some information that I don't know at that point, but I really don't see any of that happening at this point. So that's it. You're welcome.
Great, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
All right. So then, that was our last official agenda item. So we'll move to public participation. Marilyn, do we have anyone signed up? Okay. So before we get started, please understand that the board appreciates hearing from our community, but we cannot engage in dialogue or discussion during our meeting. If there is a comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. In accordance with board policies 2:30 and 8:30, we appreciate you limiting your comments to 3 minutes and for keeping tonight's meeting respectful and civil. So then, Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
Sure. Fred Whiting.
Good evening. I'm going to read this off my phone here. Is this working? I find it incredible that the new approach to the land sale is to engage the local village, school, and park while avoiding the taxpayers of Pleasantdale. We are the key stakeholders. You mentioned that earlier. The taxpayers are the key stakeholders. How about actually talking with the people you supposedly represent, as was done so successfully in 2005? How can you justify avoiding talking with all the taxpayers in Pleasantdale while they spent over a year fighting your illegally executed plan to put industrial in our neighborhood? This is not leadership. When repeatedly asking for an apology for all this illegal behavior, Jill Gretsch issued the following response. The board believes strongly in making decisions that positively impact all students in our school community and does not place the specific interest of any one community over the others. Think about that statement for a minute. It could not be farther from the truth. Number one, is it positive to destroy a feeder school district with industrial? Number two, are all communities within DO2 at that point being treated equally? Without an apology, this will continue to hang over the heads of the remaining architects, and you all know who you are, and will certainly be a factor in the next election. Our community is dead set on maintaining the current zoning that is the result of the 2005 efforts, with a special focus on the single-family residential portion that should serve as a buffer to all the existing neighborhoods on the west and south perimeter. And finally, and I hope you take this to heart, I really do, I recommend scheduling a town hall meeting with the Pleasantdale community, in Pleasantdale, and encourage you to propose some dates when this can take place. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. All right. That concludes our business for this evening. May I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, our meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.